Hello, it's Susan here from Komori no Hime Cosplay, and today we're going to be making the dress and corset for Halloween Sakura from Zombieland Saga. To make Sakura's dress, I'm using New Look 6299, and I'm just using the bodice portion of it, and I'll be using a different pattern for the skirt part of the dress. So I cut it off a little bit below the waistline out of some white cotton stretch sateen, and then zigzagged along the edges to help keep them from fraying. Sew the bodice pieces together along the side seams, leaving the back seam open, and also sew them together along the shoulder seams. For the skirt portion of the dress, I'm using cut sew pattern number 32. However, you could use your own circle skirt pattern if you prefer. And the material I'm using is a purple cotton that has this metallic print on one side of it instead of using a lavender fabric, just because I thought this would be an interesting material to work with. So I cut the pieces out and then zigzagged along the edges to help keep them from fraying. Sew the skirt pieces together along the side seams. Then, since this is essentially a circle skirt, I let it hang on the dress form for about 24 hours so that any warping that it was going to do was done, and then I trimmed away anywhere where the hem was not level. For the collar, I made my own pattern out of wrapping paper and used that to cut 4 of the pieces out of the white fabric, then paired them together, and now we're going to sew them together along the curved side. Turn the collar pieces right side out and press them flat. I also zigzagged along the edges to help keep them from fraying and to hold the two sides together. And I added some lace along the curved edges. Then I sewed the collar and the skirt to the bodice, sewed up the center back seam, and inserted a zipper. To finish off the bottom edge, I hemmed the skirt and sewed on some ruffle trim. To make the sleeves, I'm using Simplicity 1093, and I'm just using the sleeve pattern and cutting it out of the same white fabric that we used for the bodice of the dress. Then I used a disappearing ink pen to mark the line for the casing along the bottom edge. Then I lined some bias tape along the marking, and I'm going to sew it into place along the top and the bottom, leaving both of the sides open so we can insert the elastic later on. And I'm also going to go ahead and hem using a rolled hem along the bottom edge. Cut a piece of elastic to your desired length, then thread it through the channel that we made earlier and secure it into place on both sides. Usually I would prefer to have an elastic that matches the color of the fabric. However, since elastic is in short supply, this is what I'm using. Then zigzag all along the edges to help keep them from fraying, and I also sewed a line of loose stitches for gathering later on. Now we're going to fold the sleeve in half and sew it together along the side. Then gather the sleeves and attach them to the bodice, and with that, the dress is done. To make Sakura's corset, I'm using Simplicity 1093 and trimming the corset so it doesn't have the point at the top, so instead it is more of a straight line. Honestly, this wasn't the best corset pattern. I found that I had trouble with some of the pieces matching up. However, this is all that I have, so this is what I'm using. And I cut some black cotton for the outer layer, some of the metallic cotton for the lining, and then purple for the interlining, since these two materials themselves were a little bit too thin. I sewed the two center front pieces together out of black fabric, then crisscrossed some purple ribbon and sewed that into place. Then I sewed all of the pieces together to create the outer layer of the corset. I sewed the purple interlining and the sparkly lining material together the same way as the black without the ribbons. Then I sewed them together along the top and along the side so that the raw edges are only on one side of the material, so that there will be no raw edges on the inside of the garment. Then I also sewed on some boning channels to insert the boning. Then, putting right sides together, I sewed lace along the bottom of the outer portion of the corset, leaving some space on the end so it can be attached later. Putting right sides together, sew the lining to the outer layer of the corset, all along the sides, the top, and back down the side, and I folded the edges inward as I sewed on either end. I turned the corset right side out and inserted some Ridgeline boning into the boning channels. The ones on the end did give me a little bit of trouble. I made them very close to the edge, so I did have to seam rip these open to get the boning in on the end. Then I sewed just the purple section together along the bottom to keep the boning in place. I folded the bottom edge of the corset lining inward and then hand sewed everything together so that no raw edges were showing. To finish the corset, I sewed in some hand-bound eyelets and then threaded through the same purple ribbon that was used on the front. And now both the dress and corset are done. For more cosplay tutorial videos, please subscribe, and thank you very much for watching!